See this? This is me attempting to cultivate compassion. Compassion is definitely something that I've had to bring into my journey of healing from sexual abuse. Compassion was a word that was always around. It's kind of one of those keywords that religious and spiritual folk toss around. Every spiritual person or leader in any community has always talked about compassion. I mean, the Buddha, Jesus, Gandhi, the list goes on and on and on. Compassion is a very prime element of every spiritual path, of every walk in the spiritual life. I honestly can't think of any traditions that don't embrace compassion somehow. But even though this is such a key word, it's really actually an extremely hard concept to grasp. And I think the thing that I realized when I first began my journey of healing from sexual abuse was that compassion doesn't necessarily mean just loving your neighbor. It actually means loving yourself. So that whole line in the Bible where it says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Well, how can you love your neighbor if you don't even offer yourself love, if you don't offer yourself compassion? So one of the very, very first things I had to learn was how to even begin offering myself compassion. I remember walking into my therapist's office and I was berating myself for how exhausted I would be after these therapy sessions. I would just want to go home and sleep. And I was working two jobs. I was working two coffee shop jobs, not exactly anything glamorous. And I was working this insane freelance writing job. So I was getting up at the crack of dawn, sitting down at the computer, writing for hours, going to work on my feet for like 6 hours, 8 hours, sometimes 10 hours, coming home, writing more, going to bed, doing the same thing over and over again. And on my days off, I would just completely crash. But I kept berating myself for this. And my therapist really encouraged me to offer myself compassion. And slowing down was something that I had not done for basically my whole life, because my entire life was about me trying to run away from my reality. It was about me trying to prove myself and trying to escape this truth about myself, that I had been abused and that I had been in abusive situations, that I almost sought after abusive dynamics in relationships. And so I was constantly on the go, and I was constantly set out to prove my worth to the world. My mom talks about how as a kid I would come home and just sit at the kitchen table and do my homework. She would never have to ask me if I did my homework. Was I going to do my homework? No, I would have it done. This was just some sort of innate drive that's within me, and I think that's a good thing, but it's also a really, really terrible thing. And the like dark side of that innate drive is that I really lacked compassion for myself. And the only reason, well, one of the only reasons I had this drive was because of this need to prove myself. And so I have always been working on this compassion notion ever since realizing that I had been abused and that it affected me so deeply. When I was living at Llama Foundation, an intentional community in northern New Mexico, I really had to face this lack of compassion head on. It was actually in the context of an interpersonal conflict where I had been learning to be accountable for my own emotions and how to really take ownership of my part of a conflict. And which is 100%. If you're working under that philosophy, your part of a conflict is 100% of the conflict. And I had such a problem with this person in the community. Oh, she drove me bonkers. Like, seriously, absolutely insane. And the issue was that I felt like she was constantly judging me. And so I would sit down and have these conversations with her, and I would attempt to be 100% accountable, and I would present everything on my side of what I was doing, how I was perceiving the situation, what I thought that she would say, how it triggered me, why it triggered me, feelings around it, etc., etc., etc. But it was going nowhere. She couldn't really see anything. She said she wasn't really doing anything. It was sort of my issue to work on, which would drive me bonkers because I'd say, oh, but there is something there. I still, even though I was trying to be 100% accountable, I was expecting her to do something with it. So this went on for a long time, and what was driving me crazy was this fact that I couldn't offer her compassion. I was trying so hard to find this compassion deep within myself. And this story kind of goes on forever. I won't explain it all. But eventually I got to a point of almost hysteria, and actually someone within the community who does mediation work with the whole community kind of stepped in the situation and guided us through some community practices. But ultimately, what I realized was that the statements that my lovely community member was saying, and I mean that with full heart, I love her. But the statements she was making, I perceived them as judgment. And what they were hitting was this core belief within myself that began when I was 3 years old, when I was abused. This core belief, this statement that said, I can't do anything right. I can't do anything right. And this was kind of a mantra that played on constant underneath everything. And I picked it up when I was abused because somehow my 3-year-old mind decided that this abuse had been my fault and that I couldn't do anything right. And so therefore everything after this point in my life would be attempting to prove that I could do things right. But prove to who, you know? It was really trying to prove it to myself. But of course I could never do anything right. So that proof didn't really matter. You know, no matter how much I achieved, it kind of fell to the wayside. It didn't really matter. So it took me finding this statement, the part of me who believed this line, I can't do anything right, to finally realize that even if people were judging me, even if she was judging me, which she over and over said she was not, but even though I interpreted that her statements were of judgment, I actually didn't have to take that on because I could actually transfer that belief of I can't do anything right. I could compassionately hold that part of me who felt like she could not do anything right. I could hold her, I could console her, and I could remind her that she is love. She is absolute, pure, beautiful love. And so the line that I said from that was, I am. And actually, I even got a tattoo. I'll take off my clothes. Right here. It's an ocelot, which is my I am reminder. It's my embodiment of who I am. And so whenever these triggers would come up from then on, where I would be triggered by something that anyone would say that tugged at that core part of me, who believed that I couldn't do anything right, I would go like this. I am. Seems pretty simple, but this, what's that word, somatic response to it reminded me to tap back into that core self, that true belief that I actually am pure love, pure beauty, pure truth. And that, my friends, is compassion. And I couldn't offer her compassion for the way that she interacted within community and interacted with me because I couldn't find the compassion within myself. I couldn't understand that forgiveness, that love, that truth, ultimately that compassion needed to be offered to myself before I could ever extend it to her. And I think that's something that we're not really taught for some reason. You know, we're taught to love our neighbors, but really, we really need to work on loving ourselves. So that's what I have for us today. How do we expect to embody compassion for others if we can't embody it for ourselves? This topic is actually on my mind because I'm in a class right now with Frank Rogers called The Compassion Practice. And he's written a book by the same name, Compassion Practice. I haven't read it yet. I will by next week, according to my syllabus. But he said in class tonight, the definition of compassion is being moved in one's depths by another's suffering or bliss, and responding in ways that ease suffering or promote joy. So I challenge us to do that to ourselves too. How can we be moved in our depths to respond to our own suffering? Or how can we be moved in our own depths to respond to our own joy and to be excited and thankful and grateful for those experiences?